LGBTQ+ people are suddenly everywhere and constantly increasing in number. You know why is that? Because you don't even realize that you're doing it, because it's so normal. It's always adults who make a problem out of nothing by projecting their own fantasies onto children. Certainly, there are masochists who derive pleasure when they are humiliated or subjected to pain. There's nothing wrong with doing unnatural things, because that's what you do all the time. People tend to ignore the second meaning of this word. Do you really believe it's different for gay people? No, they just their way through life. If you were not homophobic, then you would not care whether a gay gene were passed to the next generation. Thank God we are not like that. I am pissed. At the time of making this video, it's 2024, and despite the widespread availability of information through pictures, videos, studies, homophobic comments on the internet are not diminishing. In fact, they even seem to be increasing. This suggests that many people are either tired of this topic or still feel some form of aversion without critically questioning it, which is easier, considering that homophobia stems from societal prejudices and ignorance. Whenever I hear a homophobic comment, I think to myself, okay, you simply don't understand this, and I know exactly where you're coming from, because for every single argument, there's at least one counter-argument. Usually there are several. To address this, I have taken it upon myself to create a video in a style I haven't seen made very often, probably due to its time-consuming nature. Primarily, it summarizes 50 comments reflecting the aforementioned prejudices I've encountered and collected from people of various nationalities and cultures throughout my life, along with my rebuttals. In addition, it is structured around distinct categories into which all the comments are organized. The video starts with biology and evolution, morality and religion, progresses through lifestyle and appearance, culture and society, and addresses more sensitive categories such as threats and harm, children and parenting, and the alleged causes and solutions of homosexuality. It concludes with rationalization and deflection, examining how people attempt to justify or dismiss their homophobic views when confronted. And yes, I know there are people who are not even willing to listen to something like this and immediately shut down. They won't watch it anyway. However, if you consider yourself an open-minded person, but still have some doubts about this topic, I might have a chance to show you another perspective. And even if you still believe there's no reason to keep watching because you don't feel addressed at all, I promise it will still provide you with new insights. At the very least, you can just view it as pure entertainment. Please note that the content of this video is supported by additional material and follows a specific algorithm. But of course, you are free to only focus on those points that interest or concern you, using the video as some kind of reference work. So let me start with a classic, albeit boring example. Homosexuality is unnatural. First of all, the word unnatural has several meanings, so how you interpret this word can differ from how others interpret it. First meaning, when something is unnatural, it doesn't occur in nature. We have plenty of examples of same-sex activity in wild animals. Animals, just like humans, can be gay. Some animals are bi or asexual. Researchers in the Oregon Health and Science University School of Medicine have confirmed that 8% of male rams are completely homosexual, meaning that even when presented with a partner of the opposite sex, they still won't go for it as they are repulsed. Queer giraffes are a thing.
After some aggressive necking bouts, it's common for two male giraffes to caress and court each other. In most cases, this eventually leads to mating.
Two male penguins raising an egg together is also a thing.
Skip and Ping are both male, they're a couple, and now they've been given an egg. And these Aussie dads, Sven and Magic, have nurtured baby Svenjik into a thriving teen.
Male-male lion couples? This too happens quite often. To this day, homosexual behavior has been documented in over 1,500 species. But as you can see, animals don't care about others engaging in homosexual activities, unlike humans, the only species that is irrational enough to exhibit homophobic behavior. But wait, is it maybe the second meaning? Is it just the fact that two men or two women cannot conceive a child? This would be one of the few claims people are actually right about. However, this phrase presupposes that the only purpose of sexual intercourse is procreation. If you believe that it serves a variety of purposes, procreation being just one of them, then there is room for all people to experience it in a variety of ways that work for them. If you have ever had non-procreative intercourse, then it is reasonable for others to do so as well. Another aspect here. If reproduction is what you care for the most, you are against every couple that doesn't have or doesn't want biological children, or even couples who adopt children. So considering that sexual attraction exists simply as nature's way of tricking people into reproducing, and two men or two women cannot do that, it's also unnatural to have intercourse with postmenopausal women or women who cannot bear children. It's unnatural to use birth control. It's unnatural to get a hand job. In fact, it's unnatural to engage in any form of sexual activity that isn't specifically and clinically for the purpose of reproduction, which occurs most of the time, at least in Western culture. And to get even more specific, by this very logic, it's unnatural to do anything that is not specifically and exclusively meant for the survival and propagation of the species. Wearing clothes is unnatural. Eating cooked food is unnatural. Using a toilet, reading books, watching TV, or driving a car is unnatural. Using any electronic devices is unnatural. After all, there is no reproduction involved. So there's nothing wrong with doing unnatural things, because that's what you do all the time. But what about the third interpretation of homosexuality being unnatural? You could also mean that it's not natural to you personally, because you are not like that. Of course, for, let's take heterosexual people themselves, homosexuality is not natural in the sense of not inherent, because heterosexual people are heterosexual, not homosexual. And guess what? So is heterosexuality to homosexual people, because they are homosexual. One excludes the other. The thing is, by default, everyone perceives others through the lens of their own thoughts and feelings. A man in the higher percentiles of heterosexuality might think that straight is normal, while a man in the higher percentiles of homosexuality might view being gay as normal. In reality, no one has an idea about the extent of differences between oneself and others in any conceivable aspect. The tendency to assume that others share the same thoughts and feelings simply stems from ignorance. You can't judge others based on yourself just because you belong to the majority. Speaking of the majority, one interpretation is still left. Do you perhaps mean it's not average? Hence, not normal? Yes, because they are a minority, just like left-handed people or people with green eyes or red hair. They are not average either. Strangely enough, I've never heard anyone say these people are not normal. In the end, the naturalness of a certain feeling or behavior is completely irrelevant. You could say that polygamy is natural. You could say that lions naturally eat their own cubs under certain circumstances. You could say that murdering a stranger simply because you don't know them was probably a pretty natural thing to do 100 years ago. Child criminality occurs in nature as well. But don't all these things have a negative connotation in society? Although they could be considered natural? Again, it's completely irrelevant. So let's move on to the second argument, which is not irrelevant, but it's similar to the first one. Homosexuality is against biology. No, there are actually biological reasons for homosexuality. What we are taught in school biology is just a very simplified version of the theory of evolution, if people are taught evolution at all. Some of the words used surrounding evolution are also very confusing because their colloquial meaning and their meaning in evolutionary biology discourse are different. There are plausible theories in terms of benefits and causes. One biological benefit is the survival of the fittest. When people think of this, they usually think of fit people, physically strong, powerful, and athletic. But that isn't actually what reproductive fitness means. Reproductive fitness, mostly referred to as Darwinian fitness, is only about which creatures can survive long enough to pass on the most copies of their genes to fertile offspring, who will then pass on those genes to even more creatures. In social species who live in family groups that practice alloparenting, having homosexual group members can be an important survival strategy. Again, let's take animals, for example. When heterosexual parents in animal kingdom are killed or die or disown their offspring, homosexual parents would adopt the orphan child and raise it. Other heterosexual couples usually don't do that because they are busy reproducing. So there have to be at least some animals who are not willing to produce biological offspring. And now let's compare it to humans. What purpose does grandma serve once she hits menopause? Right, she helps raise the kids. Quite often. This is an evolutionary advantage for the family. And the same goes with the gay aunt and the gay uncle. Another theory is that in times of hunger and drought, it helps when you have a small reserve of individuals who don't reproduce on their own, so there aren't more mouths to feed, but do help find food and care for infants. This is called kin selection. Next one. There are already more than 8 billion people on Earth. If all people in this world were heterosexual, this would be a disaster for our Earth that would eventually become unable to sustain us all. So there must be some kind of population control ensuring species do not overpopulate spaces, even if food is abundantly available and conditions are ideal. And now onto the biological origin. It has been observed that many times statistically, when a woman has more than 3 sons, there's a higher chance that the ones born after the third might be gay. This might be because in human societies where competition for resources and mates is intense, having too many males of reproductive age in a group can lead to conflicts and destabilize the community. In the past, humans were more likely to face threats from other humans than from predators like lions. So it could be advantageous for some males in a tribe not to compete for females and instead help care for offspring, increasing the chances of survival for the family. One theory suggests that the woman's immune system becomes resistant to a male baby's XY chromosomes after having a certain number of sons. This resistance can affect later sons, making them smaller at birth, which can also be another marker of future homosexuality. These characteristics are present from birth and are influenced by the hormones the fetus is exposed to while developing in the mother's womb. To sum up the first and second argument, what you mean by homosexuality being unnatural or against biology is simply the idea that it might be not appropriate or moral, but you're rendering it objective by using words like natural or biology. If it's not moral, it means it's not moral for you personally, which I will come back to later. There are only 2 biological sexes, or you yourself consist of 2 sexes. Okay, even if we ignore the existence of intersex people, so what? This is a classic strawman argument because it sidesteps the real issue by focusing on biological sex, implying, again, that only a man and a woman can biologically conceive a child. But that's not the point we're discussing, because homosexuality is not a gender identity. It's a sexual orientation. One has nothing to do with the other. Who's the man? Who's the woman? Well, this question can be interpreted in different ways. And how do you define a man and a woman? If you're, again, referring to biological sex, then it's simple. If it's about 2 men, then neither of them is a woman. And if it's about 2 women, then neither of them is a man. And the best part is that neither side has to take on women's work or men's work, because both sides are completely equal. By default, each contributes their unique skills to the relationship, creating harmony together, just like a symphony orchestra, where every musician plays a different instrument, but there's no fixed leader among them. They all contribute their unique sounds to create a harmonious piece of music. Gay people cannot procreate. Interesting. On one hand, you claim that homosexuality is unnatural. On the other hand, you argue that gay people naturally cannot reproduce. So they're naturally like that. But that brings us back to the very first argument. And no, gay people can reproduce just like straight people. in a completely natural way. However, the question here is whether they want to. Imagine having to sexually interact with someone you have no sexual attraction to. In theory, that's possible. And in many countries where gay people are suppressed, they have children through natural means by suppressing their true sexual orientation. Another one I will leave for later. Gay people will go extinct because of their inability to have children. As I just said, gay people don't have an inability to have children. They just don't want to do it under natural circumstances, if they are in an environment where they are allowed not to hide their sexual orientation. But there are gay people who do have biological children, for example, in regions where they are forced to hide, so they engage in heterosexual relationships. If being gay really meant you couldn't have children, and therefore homosexuality would go extinct, where did all these gay people come from? And why are they only going to go extinct in the future? Why didn't it already happen in the past? Especially when homosexual behavior could earn a death sentence. So as long as straight parents keep giving birth to them, they won't go extinct. The human race will go extinct due to homosexuality. Okay, so some people claim it's gay people who will go extinct, while others claim it's the whole human race that will go extinct. You realize that most gay people have straight parents, don't you? And since gay people have been around since the beginning of humanity, and there is still no pattern of extinction, it's probably not homosexuality that makes the human race go extinct. The likelihood of humanity going extinct due to wars, viruses, or overpopulation is probably greater than the likelihood of extinction due to homosexuality. Homosexuality is immoral. The problem with morality is the fact that it is often shaped by cultural, religious, philosophical, and even individual perspectives, leading to diverse interpretations of what is right or wrong. So what is considered moral in one context may be viewed differently in another. However, in a general sense and in any culture, moral-based arguments are only invoked when considering the effects an act has on someone. So in cases where an act causes someone more good than harm, we generally consider them to be moral acts. In cases where an act causes someone more harm than good, we generally consider them to be immoral acts. For example, deception, theft, betrayal, discrimination, exploitation, dishonesty, and violations of consent. Now, homosexuality in its core is a feeling. It's about who you are attracted to in a sexual manner. There are moral and immoral gay people, and there are moral and immoral straight people. Sexual orientation has nothing to do with it, because you cannot hurt anyone by who you are secretly attracted to. What you are referring to is not the sexual orientation. No, what you are referring to is what it potentially leads to, namely sexual behavior, meaning you can act on your attraction or not. So when it comes to that very behavior, there are usually two people involved who are actively engaged in sexual relations. Sexual relations that are consensual are mutually agreed upon by both parties involved as it is something they want. As such, when considering the moral arguments, both of the people involved agree that this is causing them good, not harm. And as such, would be considered by the two people involved to be a moral act, or, at worst, a morally neutral act. In this case, no one else's opinion matters because it doesn't affect anyone else, so it cannot be immoral by definition. Therefore, in conclusion, the only people whose opinion matters all concur that it is morally correct or neutral. It's crucial to recognize that there are diverse sexual preferences that can actually lead to immoral actions, if they harm others who cannot consent. However, if homosexuality involves consensual activities between adults, it cannot be deemed immoral, as it doesn't harm anyone involved. The only way it could lead to immorality is by being dishonest to other people about one's sexual orientation and pretending to be someone they're not when directly asked, which itself is a result of homophobia, which causes homosexual people harm in the first place. So it's not homosexuality that is immoral. No, it's homophobia. Speaking of actions that harm others without their consent, Having biological children or consuming meat are nowadays more and more subject to moral debates because of the involvement of sentient beings who cannot provide consent. Ironically, this is what most people on this planet do. And again, there are animals who eat their own children under certain circumstances. So if we derive our morals from what is natural or biologic, we should at least admit that eating our children is a morally good thing. Gay people should be executed. Why do you get to decide that another person or an entire group of people should be condemned to death when they have done absolutely nothing to you and probably won't even affect your life in any way? What's the damn reason? Well, maybe the next argument will explain it. My religion forbids homosexuality. Okay, just because your religion prohibits other people from being gay, which as mentioned is not possible, I'm going to forbid you from eating cookies because I'm on a diet. Sounds fair, right? What's written in religious texts has been interpreted in countless ways over the centuries. Just because it's written in a book doesn't mean it has to be taken literally or applied rigidly today. Have you ever considered that there might be many other rules in those texts that you no longer follow? For example, does your religion forbid drinking alcohol? And what do you drink on weekends or at celebrations? Alcohol? What about wearing clothes made from mixed fibers? Ever check the tag when you go shopping? And what about people who cheat? What about people who work on Sundays? Police officers, doctors, hotel staff, and more. And let's not forget about men with long hair. Okay, those were just a few examples that might not apply to you. But there are certainly other things that people today no longer follow, even though they are written in these books. And no one says anything against it. So why cling to this particular argument when it comes to homosexuality? Okay, maybe it's time to leave these judgments to a higher authority. God is against homosexuality. Or, God created men and women to procreate. Or, homosexuality is a sin. In the Middle Ages, they said that being left-handed was unnatural, that it was against God. Also, when the many animal species in nature contain members that are attracted to the same sex, is it because they can't read the Bible? Okay, if your God does not approve homosexuality and declares it to be a sin, don't you think that this power that is supposed to have created everything around us also has the capability to address homosexuality on its own? Do you, as a tiny speck on this earth, truly believe that you need to assist your God in eradicating homosexual people? I don't think so. Because if your God truly exists and does not want homosexuality to exist, don't you believe that he can handle it on its own? I do. Gay people shouldn't be allowed to marry. Or, gay marriage should be forbidden. A gay marriage is just a marriage, a bond between usually two people who want to spend their lives together. But if you feel the need to specify the biological sexes of the people involved, it's officially called same-sex marriage. Secondly, what exactly are you afraid of? That children can't be conceived? Again, funny how so many same-sex couples do have children. Probably because there's not just one way to have them, but several. Depending on the legal situation, these include artificial insemination, sperm donation, surrogacy, co-parenting, foster care, adoption, etc. Oh, and there are also many opposite-sex couples who don't have children. So, as we can see, marriage is not about giving birth. But maybe you're referring to something completely different. Maybe you're again referring to the Holy Scriptures, such as the Bible. In that case, let me remind you that there are many things written in these books that people no longer follow, and no one says anything against it. A book saying, don't do this or this is bad, without providing any further argumentation or logic to back up this claim, is fallacious. There is no rational way to oppose something that has zero material effect on your life. Which brings me to the actual reason behind this idea. A same-sex marriage is simply about equal rights. Let's say all gay people in the world are allowed to marry. They don't have to, but they are allowed to. What do you think will change for you personally? For you, surprise, nothing will change. And you know why? Because equal rights for others do not mean fewer rights for you. If gay people are allowed to marry, for you, nothing will change. Homosexuality is a choice. Have you, as an adult, ever hung around with people taller than yourself? Yes? Okay, and has your own height increased from hanging around with them? No? Well, if hanging around with taller people doesn't encourage you to become taller, then how can being around someone who is gay, another biological feature, make you gay? That's like saying you could decide to have dark skin, green eyes, or red hair. No one can control it, right? Well, you can dye your hair and change the color. But that doesn't change your natural hair color, doesn't it? And I assume you can't control your attraction to the opposite gender either. Sexual orientation is firmly rooted in an individual. Homosexual people simply became aware of their orientation at some point in their lives, as well as heterosexual people. Again, religious people, and I mean only those who are against gay people, need to claim that it's a sinful choice because otherwise they couldn't justify their position if being gay was biological. And again, it's homosexual behavior that is a choice, not homosexuality itself. If you, as a straight man, slept with other men because society wants you to, it still wouldn't make you gay, because the object you're attracted to is still the same, regardless of what you do. Because what you do can have different reasons. Okay, here are 2 short stories. I've known since I was 12 years old, and since I accepted it at the age of 17, I've had some horrible things happen to me. I've been beaten, I've been attacked, I've been fired from jobs. You name it, it's happened. Why on earth would I make a choice to live a life where I'm going to get attacked for walking down the street just because I'm gay? Why would I choose a life where I'm going to get fired from a job when they find out I'm gay? And this was before it was illegal to do it. I can't imagine why anybody would choose to live a life where they are constantly getting called names or being treated like shit or being beaten, etc. I've never in my life had physical attraction for a woman, not even for half a second. So that's the way it is for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but I'm pretty sure that nobody would choose to be like that. A few years ago, I met an elderly Norwegian Lutheran pastor. He was probably in his 80s. And as we were sitting and talking, somehow the topic of same-sex marriage came up. I was surprised to hear him adamantly assert that people are born gay. How are you so sure? I asked. I was a pastor for 50 years, he said. During that time, if you knew the number of young people who would come into my office and cry and beg me to pray for them so that Jesus would forgive them and just let them be straight, you'd be sure that no one chooses this too. Another important aspect is that many individuals stating homosexuality to be a choice do so because they themselves could be, not are, but could be, at least bisexual. And they did indeed choose for themselves not to act on their own attraction to the same gender. But again, being something and acting on it are different things. With a stunning lack of basic empathy, they then decide that because they made a choice, everyone else must think and feel as they do and is able to make the same choice. In reality, they are just suppressing their own orientation. The word orientation just means attraction directed towards a specific object. And this is just a feeling, not an act. Heterosexuality refers to individuals of the opposite gender or sex, which of course has to be the majority. Homosexuality refers to individuals of the same gender or sex. Bisexuality refers to individuals of both the female and male genders or sexes, as bi means two, referring to the two main sexes. Pansexuality refers to individuals regardless of gender or sex. More precisely, it means seeing only the person, not the gender. This includes people of all groups: binary, non-binary, cisgender, transgender, intersex people, etc. It simply means being gender blind. Now, of course, it's also possible not to feel sexually attracted to anyone, which is called asexuality. Again, it's not a lifestyle choice that people make consciously. With the shitty way some societies treat gay people, I would imagine it wouldn't be something most people would choose to be, if they could help it. Certainly, there are masochists who derive pleasure when they are humiliated or subjected to pain. However, No person who is not masochistically inclined would choose to be bullied in school or society, to be beaten, spat upon, persecuted, or even executed, as is customary in some countries to this day. Who the hell would willingly choose such things? In conclusion, if you think it's a choice, I dare you to change your sexual orientation, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Let's go! I know people who used to be straight but became gay. Gay people have always been gay, just like straight people have always been straight. The fact that someone comes out as gay later in life doesn't mean that they were somehow converted in the intervening years. For some gay people, the knowledge of their sexuality was repressed as they grew up and matured, given the prevalence of heteronormativity in all cultures, which can be very confusing to the one affected. For other gay people, fear or duty may make them hide how they feel until the fear is dissipated or the duty discharged. For example, many gay men hide as straight by having token girlfriends so that nobody reads them as gay. In conclusion, when a person you've known for a long time comes out to you as gay, remember they're still the same person, only now you know more about them. Gay people look and behave like the opposite gender. Do they? I mean, all of them? Oh, I guess you're talking about this kind of people.
Oh, hello there, beautiful. You beautiful angel, you. You gorgeous butterfly. Did you just hatch out of your cocoon? 'Cause you're looking quite butterfly-ish.
For me, it really isn't, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we all, our lives, they all revolve around around masculinity. We live in a patriarchy. We have no choice, whether we like it or not. Everything is about masculinity.
Of course, there are gay people who look or behave like what you consider to be typical for the opposite gender, and there are the ones who happen to contribute to this stereotype. But let me remind you that these are only the ones who are visible. That's why you think you know when someone is gay. They just have to look like it. Otherwise, they're straight. But now let's have a look at some other gay people.
This moment is something that I've always known would happen. I just didn't know when it would happen. And I definitely did not imagine it happening in the current world circumstances.
No, they won't ever merge because they're two totally different games. And one's northern-based and one's southern-based. And would I ever play rugby union? I'm afraid I'm just too long in the tooth.
People make jokes sometimes because I talk about growing up really foreign, and then they're like, you grew up in Orange County, but you have to understand that I was born in 1990, so like in the early to late 90s, the Middle East wasn't really on a lot of people's radars.
Honestly, if you happen to see on the street one of the people I just showed you, would you seriously think of them as gay? I don't think so. And by the way, there are also straight people who look or behave like what you consider to be typical for the opposite gender, but they are straight. Gay people just need attention. Well, some gay people do, some don't. The same applies to any other group of people, such as straight people. Gay people are disgusting perverts. If there are no religious arguments against homosexuality, but people still have an issue with it, it's almost always because they imagine two men engaging in certain activities, or if they are male, a man doing something with them. And then they think, ooh, I don't want that. And just because they don't want it for themselves, they believe others shouldn't either. It's the same as if I were to reduce heterosexuality to just one aspect. I mean, there are certainly straight people who are in a relationship for that reason alone. But for many, there are undoubtedly other aspects, right? Do you really believe it's different for gay people? No, they just f*** their way through life. No, gay people are exactly the same. Gay people are exactly the same as straight people. They are just oriented towards the same gender. That's it. All other aspects are exactly the same. They eat, they sleep, they go to school or work, they pay bills, etc. And I'm sure you wouldn't want to be discriminated against for what you do with your partner behind closed doors either. Oh, and it gets completely absurd when men say, gays are disgusting, but lesbians are okay. Yeah, lesbians are okay because they actually turn you on. That's why lesbians are okay, but not gay guys. Very consistent. It's disgusting to look at a gay couple, again, it's mostly two men who cause irritation, while holding hands or kissing because for you, it's just unusual. It's not what you're used to seeing every day because in many countries they just hide. But they still exist. In other countries, they don't hide, as do heterosexual couples around the world. So if it was a hetero couple that would do exactly the same, it would look usual to you because you are used to seeing a man and a woman holding hands or kissing. Or if you were born in a family of same-sex parents, such a sight would be exactly as normal to you as if it was a man and a woman. To be honest, the first time I saw two men kissing, it was unfamiliar to me as well. But then I realized that I had the exact same thoughts when, as a child, I first saw a man and a woman kissing. Conclusion: people always feel fear, or in this case, disgust, towards things they simply don't know. Things they have rarely or never seen before. They are just not used to it. By the way, this is why there are so-called pride parades. If you are referring to pride parades, of course you see many disgusting people, because these people are usually those you see in public. They are just visible, and they probably want to be seen. Again, they contribute to this idea you have in your head. But not every gay person is like that. As in any other society, many of them are just extroverts who need other people around and just like partying. But there are such among straight people as well. So if there were so-called straight parades, for whatever reason, they would look exactly the same. Exactly the same, just with straight people. And no, gay pride was not born of a need to celebrate being gay, but the right to exist without persecution. So instead of wondering why there isn't a straight pride movement, just be thankful you don't need one. Oh, and let me remind you that you don't have to participate in them if you don't want to. I don't, because I don't like partying in general. You don't have to either. I think many people wrongfully confuse or relate all LGBTQ+ people with perversion as though there are no perverted people that identify as non-LGBTQ+. It is perversion that is hated, not people who are just homosexual. Gay people are unhappy. Okay, so on one hand, they choose to be gay. On the other hand, they are unhappy. Conclusion, they intentionally choose to be unhappy. So again, they are masochists. They are happy and unhappy gay people, just as they are happy and unhappy straight people. However, if gay people are unhappy about their sexuality, it is precisely because of homophobic individuals, as apart from their sexual orientation, they differ in no way from straight people. Therefore, suicide rates of young homosexual children in countries that persecute such people are much higher than in other countries. I don't know any gay person. Or, I've never met a gay person in real life. You don't know. Every time you leave your home, go outside, and see other people, there is a high chance you also see gay people. And if you go outside every day, you probably see them every day. You just don't know that they are gay. In my country, there are no gay people. As I said earlier, in many countries where gay people are suppressed, they have children through natural means by suppressing their true sexual orientation, which of course leads their compatriots to thinking they simply don't exist. When someone says it's our right and duty to keep our country free of people who don't belong in our homeland nor accept behavior that is not in line with our culture, traditions, and religion, I start doubting that persecuting a whole segment of the population that doesn't harm anyone is a valid cultural tradition. Every country is by default equally filled with gay people. Always has been. It's just that somewhere they are forced to hide. Let's have a look at this world map. It shows the world laws pertaining to homosexual relationships and expression. I will now mention only the most common laws. The dark blue color represents same-sex marriages. The blue color represents other forms of same-sex partnerships. The light blue color represents the conditional recognition of same-sex partnerships at the federal but not state level. Gray represents no recognition of same-sex partnerships. Beige represents restrictions on freedom of expression. In all countries of the aforementioned colors, homosexuality is more or less legal. However, the countries where homosexuality is officially illegal are yellow to dark red. Yellow represents officially punishable but de facto no prosecution. Orange represents severe penalties. Red represents imprisonment or life imprisonment. And dark red represents death penalty. If we internalize these laws and compare them with the people in whose countries there are no homosexual people, it quickly becomes clear why they don't exist. But let's assume that in some countries they really don't exist, or that there are at least far fewer of them. It could perhaps also be because these people emigrate, namely to a country where gay people are not persecuted. There are, of course, various statistics, but on average, homosexuality is estimated to be up to 5% of any population. When it comes to the LGBTQ+ community in general, it can be up to 10%. So on average, every 10th person you meet is not heterosexual or cisgender. Every 10th person. Okay, let's take this rough figure of 10% and consider this study from 2019, which involved 34 countries and focused on the acceptance of homosexuality. What a coincidence that only up to 10% of the population in countries like Indonesia, Tunisia, or Nigeria believed it should be accepted in society. When you take into account the legal situation in these countries and the LGBTQ+ proportion of the population, it becomes clear who likely voted in favor of homosexuality being accepted. Most likely, those who can deeply empathize with what it's like to be different, oppressed, or persecuted themselves. My country doesn't discriminate against gay people. My country doesn't discriminate against gay people, but on the other hand, they don't exist. Just because there is no discrimination on an official level does not automatically mean that it actually doesn't exist. There is what is known as social rejection, and there is legal rejection. These are two different things. Homosexuality is a trend or ideology. Or, there are more gay people now than there used to be. What truly did not exist in the past was the word homosexuality, just as there wasn't a word for many other things. However, this doesn't change the fact that this feeling has always existed among people. So it's not about existence. It's about awareness and visibility. The more people come out and talk about it, the more others feel encouraged to do the same, which naturally leads to an exponential increase in visibility. Another reason for the increase in homosexuality lies in social media. If you're homophobic, come across an LGBTQ+ post, can't hold back your hate, and then comment or interact with it in some other way, the algorithm registers this behavior. It recognizes that such posts trigger you and that you react to them, which is crucial for social media. As a result, you are logically shown more and more posts with LGBTQ+ content, creating the impression that LGBTQ+ people are suddenly everywhere and constantly increasing in number. By the way, even if all humans were homosexual, which is not possible, women would either have to use other methods, which I mentioned earlier, or tolerate the natural kind to have offspring, as people in some countries do. And you know what would be the best in this scenario? In such a world, almost all children would at least be planned and desired. And now, let's move on to my personal highlight. Gay people announce their sexuality everywhere. You know who has always been announcing their sexual orientation everywhere and all the time? Straight people. For years, decades, even centuries. Nearly every form of media, from books and plays to songs and films, has predominantly featured straight relationships. The representation of gay individuals in movies is significantly smaller compared to their straight counterparts. Whether it's animated or live-action films, the narrative often revolves around boy meets girl. These straight relationships are not only prevalent in media for adults, but also in children's content. So my question to you is, why can't straight people just be straight without announcing it everywhere? Don't tell me that there aren't straight people who talk about their partners or spouses at work. Don't tell me that there aren't women who talk about the romantic weekend they spent with their boyfriend in the mountains. Don't tell me that straight people never hold hands in public, kiss each other in public, and otherwise show their affection for each other in public. You realize that straight people don't have to think twice before mentioning their interests, spouses, and families, or kissing and holding hands in public.
I adore mushrooms. My husband and I love foraging for mushrooms. We go way back, way before we had children. Back when we lived in Montana, we loved foraging for morels. We spent some time in the Pacific Northwest.
This time, my girlfriend was in the show as the dance captain, and so I knew what was going on, and I was really kind of sitting at home bummed out that I didn't get the job.
Social media are flooded with straight people's proposals, weddings, and romantic vacations, discussing their attraction to the opposite gender all the time. And nobody gets upset about that. You know why is that? Because you don't even realize that you're doing it. And you don't realize it because it's so normal. This phenomenon is called heteronormativity. And then you still have the audacity to say that someone just mentioning they went to the movies with their significant other is shoving it down your throat. Let me tell you something. When straight people stop announcing to the world that they are straight, which is never happening, then gay people will do the same. Until then, you will just have to accept that gay people exist and are not going to hide their sexual orientation. Homosexual individuals have actively fought for visibility and representation in various forms of media. They desire the freedom to live their lives openly, just like everyone else. If their mentioning of interests, spouses, families, public displays of affection, or sharing romantic moments on social media makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is a personal matter and should not be projected onto others. It's not their problem to solve. Gay people don't need to come out, because straight people don't do that either. They do, as I just mentioned. By the way, coming out is another term people seem to be irritated by, not realizing that they themselves do it all the time. Again, heteronormativity is a thing. As long as people assume that everyone around them is straight, unless stated otherwise, this stating otherwise automatically becomes an outing. So in order to make gay people not coming out, you just don't have to assume anything, which is rarely the case because heteronormativity. But let's imagine a different perspective. When you ask a gay man you know basically nothing about a potential girlfriend, he has two options. He either lies to you about his orientation, or he comes out automatically. So if you're irritated by gay people's coming outs, why do you ask them about a girlfriend or a boyfriend in the first place, when in reality you have no idea what they prefer?
Why not?
Well, alone? Do you have a girlfriend?
No. I guess she didn't watch my video.
It felt almost like my uncle, like at Thanksgiving saying, "So Allison, do you have a boyfriend?" You know, it's just like, you don't know me at all.
Once you ask, I assume you want to hear the truth, don't you? There is nothing wrong with asking a person something like, are you in a relationship with someone? Or is there a person in your life? Or straight away, do you have a girlfriend or boyfriend? Nothing complicated. A person in an opposite-sex relationship cannot be gay. As already mentioned, most cultures are dominated by heteronormativity, but they are also dominated by mononormativity. Someone in a relationship with a person of the opposite gender is automatically perceived as heterosexual, and someone presenting a same-sex partner is automatically perceived as homosexual, until they explicitly state otherwise. Okay, in most cases, it might really be as some people think. But what about bisexual people? Or what about asexual people? The orientation of these people is practically invisible because it cannot be easily determined from one single relationship. Therefore, I find the labels heterosexual or homosexual relationship inappropriate in general. As long as the orientation is not explicitly stated, you can never know if both sides truly identify that way. Not to mention other cultures that don't accept homosexuality at all. Nobody cares about who does what with whom. This statement can be interpreted in both anti- and pro-homosexual ways. Positively, it suggests that the government shouldn't interfere in the private lives of its citizens and should allow them to live freely. Negatively, it implies that homosexuals, again, feel the need to reveal their orientation, even though no one is interested. Firstly, if truly no one cares, why are tabloids full of rumors about the sexual orientation of certain celebrities? And secondly, when politicians decide to crack down on homosexual behavior, then they do care about who is involved with whom. Otherwise, they wouldn't try to stop it. Ironically, this comment often comes from people who, in the next moment, talk about their own heterosexual partners, even though no one cares who is involved with whom. Real-life behavior suggests otherwise. And, as I mentioned earlier, a romantic relationship isn't necessarily a sexual one. See asexuality. Therefore, unless it's explicitly stated or there's clear evidence of sexual activity, you cannot assume anything is happening at all. You never know. I'm a normal man and don't want to get hit on by a gay man. Yes, as if you're the hottest catch in the world and every gay guy who talks to you immediately wants to get into bed with you. Counter question to you. Would you sleep with any random woman in the world? I don't think so. And even if you would, you wouldn't want to be seen by other men as an object just like you do when you stare at women. You wouldn't want to experience how women feel, because deep down you know that being objectified sucks. Why not turn it around? Just say no thanks and just take it as a compliment that another person finds you attractive. Everyone would be happy. Homosexuality is a mental disease or disorder. In 1973, the American Psychological Association decided after a couple decades of study that being gay wasn't a mental illness. We've had several more decades of study that pretty much say the same thing. Also, the long-standing research in the human sciences provided clear findings that no longer justified considering homosexuality as a disease. Therefore, in 1990, the World Health Organization removed the term homosexuality from the international list of plagues, diseases, and epidemics. Since then, no scientifically credible results have emerged that could justify a different perspective. The delay resulted from ideological, political, religious, or simply cultural objections and concerns raised by certain states. In particular, countries in the Afro-Arabian and South Asian regions, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., were among them. The Vatican joined in and conducted active diplomacy behind the scenes, as usual when it came to preventing any form of recognition or normalization of homosexual behavior. So nowadays, you could just say that any sexual orientation is a mental disease, or none of them. Gay people are a threat to society. Okay, the actual threat is homophobia. How can gay people be a threat to anyone? By doing what? By eating, sleeping, going to school or work, paying bills, like other people? Or maybe because of the next argument. Gay people spread HIV and AIDS. Let's now take a look at another world map that shows the percentage of the population infected with HIV and suffering from AIDS worldwide. The gray color indicates that no data is available. Green represents under 0.1%, and the colors from light yellow to dark red indicate increasing percentages. What do we notice here? In most countries where gay people are largely accepted, such as in America or Central Europe, the infection rate doesn't seem to be particularly high. This suggests that the tolerance towards gay people does not have a negative impact on the spread of AIDS. Strange that in countries where people are relatively tolerant towards homosexuals, people are much less likely to contract AIDS than in countries that prohibit homosexual relationships. It is true that AIDS was initially discovered in the LGBTQ+ community, particularly among gay men. This was due to a widespread, though not universal, culture of rejecting patriarchal norms, which often meant not only avoiding relationships with women, but also avoiding monogamous relationships, leading to a lot of usually unprotected intercourse. However, the label stuck to pure homophobia. It was easier to consider it a disease of the faggots than to recognize it as a severe sexually transmitted disease. Nowadays, some of the worst hit groups are seniors. And why is that? Men and women who were married during the initial spread of AIDS and who in the past 20 years have divorced or lost their spouse are now back in the dating scene and often use no protection. But nobody calls it the elderly plague, because not only is there no stigma against seniors, or at least the stigma isn't that bad, but also because the idea of older people having intercourse is often considered unthinkable. We shouldn't expose children to sexualization by exposing them to homosexuality. And once again, homosexuality is reduced to one single aspect. And now, let's turn it around. What do you think children usually think about when they talk about their straight parents? What do they think about when they see other children's straight parents? What do they think about when they watch children's films in which a boy meets a girl? I highly doubt that they think about sexuality. And I highly doubt that you have your children take part in any sexual activity you do with your partner. So why the hell should it be different with gay parents? Why? They are exactly the same. They take care of their children, do the household, pay bills, etc. And as well as normal parents, they don't expose their children to any sexual stuff. Why would they? And even if they do, it's not because of their sexual orientation. It's because they are assholes. Do you know why you're thinking that exposing children to homosexual people equates exposing them to sexualization? Again, it's because you, watching two men just holding hands together, create a certain idea in your mind, and then you project this idea onto any child without realizing that children don't give a shit about sexuality, because they are children. If they are exposed to same-sex relationships, then they know from the very beginning that these people exist without thinking about sexuality. The same goes with opposite-sex relationships. It would be totally normal to them that they are just different constellations. Have you ever watched a movie in childhood and later in adulthood again and noticed something sexual or dirty that you didn't notice when you were a child? If yes, then you should understand that children still don't think about that stuff, because they are still children, unlike you. I have a great example. There's this martial arts movie I grew up with called No Retreat, No Surrender. The plot follows a young martial artist named Jason, who, after his father is attacked by a crime syndicate, seeks guidance from the spirit of Bruce Lee. With Lee's inspiration, Jason trains to confront the criminals and their hired martial artists. That training scene starts like this. Starts harmless, doesn't it? Going on, you can see Jason's new friend RJ, who motivates him to get even stronger. If you are an adult, which I hope you are, watching this video, RJ sitting on Jason while training might evoke something in you. To be more precise, when some clips of the movie or the movie itself first came online on YouTube and you could see people's reactions in the comments, many people of my generation wrote something like, "Interesting. When I was a kid, I didn't even pay attention to that clip, and now I'm thinking of something completely different." Because it's always adults who make a problem out of nothing by projecting their own fantasies onto children. So it's always what you yourself interpret into it that makes you worry about your child. Children don't think about what you think. They don't care. And by the way, your children see and are exposed to homosexual people all the time. You just don't know that they're homosexual until they hold hands together. Homophobia is learned by parents and society. Considering that many people are afraid to face their own heterosexuality, I can only imagine how terrified they are of these scary gays. Children do best in an environment with both a mother and a father. You do realize that a great part of most societies is not raised by one mother and one father? There are many single parents. There are many children who are raised by mom and grandma, a same-sex family. There can be any other female person to take on the role of the mother, such as the aunt. You know, it's not like lesbians have no men in their lives, and gay guys don't have any women in their lives. And even if there is a real mom and dad, what about alcoholic parents? What about violent parents? What about couples who had their children accidentally, which cannot happen to same-sex couples? And most importantly, what about orphans in children's homes who don't have any parents at all? Do you forget about their existence? So the main thing to you is that there are just no same-sex parents, right? Everything else doesn't matter. What is better for a child? To be raised in one of the last listed circumstances, or to be raised by two loving parents regardless of their gender? If you choose the first, then you are willing to deprive a child of the opportunity to live a normal life in a normal home. Is that what you call normal or traditional values? Two men or two women raising a child. What a nightmare! If this topic truly interests you and you find a few studies to read, almost all lead to the same result. Homosexual parents are no different from heterosexual parents. And sometimes same-sex parents even have advantages because they tend to be more open-minded, developed, knowledgeable, versatile, and they calmly discuss any issues with their children. And as I mentioned earlier, they also don't strictly adhere to gender roles, which positively influences the family atmosphere, since all members are equally involved in household matters and responsibilities. Psychologists have concluded that children from same-sex families achieve normal success in personal and professional development. In some cases, they even demonstrate higher levels of self-esteem and self-worth and even better grades in school. All because of the positive family atmosphere at home. The children themselves have positively evaluated their experience of growing up in same-sex families and did not feel disadvantaged at all.
My name is Dima Watkins. I am 15 years old. I lived there for about a year in an orphanage before my two dads, John and Andy, came to adopt me and bring me home to Minneapolis. A straight family is considered normal, even if the husband or wife is an alcoholic and they're abusing each other or the child. My parents, I'm so happy to have the parents that I have. John teaches English and history. Andy teaches English.
I have two dads, and I have strong female figures in my life. They never parented me, but sure, I know that they're there if I need them. I mean, when I got my period, I went to my dad's. I didn't want to go to any woman because they're my parents and they made me feel loved. And I had never, ever once wanted a mom, sought a mom, thought I was missing something because I didn't have a mom, and I'm sick and tired of people telling me that I am missing something.
My name is Zach Walls. I'm a sixth-generation Iowan and an engineering student at the University of Iowa, and I was raised by two women, and I'm doing pretty well. I scored in the 99th percentile on the ACT. I'm actually an Eagle Scout. I own and operate my own small business because the sexual orientation of my parents has had zero effect on the content of my character. Thank you very much.
Any research opposing this perspective usually turns out to be associated with religious organizations or activists trying to counteract a perceived threat based on politics or other motives. Genuine studies with clear and appropriate methodologies consistently provide a straightforward answer. There is no issue with raising children in same-sex families. Some politicians may argue that these studies were conducted at the behest of the gay lobby and Western government. But do you really think that in Western countries, people wish harm to their children? In any reasonable society, children are the highest value. In some countries, for instance, the law allows parents to physically discipline their children without consequences. In contrast, in other countries, it is prohibited to physically discipline children. Can you imagine? It's not allowed to hit children. But how are they supposed to be raised now? How can someone teach a person something without resorting to physical punishment? Apparently, that's possible. However, there is still a danger that people may think the following. Gay parents are selfish because their children will be bullied in school. Okay, so the problem is not the parenting methods or the sexual orientation of the parents. The problem here lies in the existence of individuals in society with outdated medieval notions of who should be with whom, what constitutes a family, and what should it not be. By the way, why should we be concerned in the first place considering that homosexuality is not a bad thing? If every person in society contributed to making it normal, there wouldn't be any room for bullying at all. So please start with yourself. LGBTQ+ activists want children to be exposed to LGBTQ+ content in schools to groom them into their lifestyle. Well, I learned about Nazis in school, but I never became a Nazi. I also did a project about the Titanic, but I never felt compelled to captain a ship into an iceberg. Being exposed to other sexualities that actually exist in the world allows for tolerance. Let's say you have red hair. If people were raised to believe that red-haired people are witches or inferior and a sign of the devil, your life would be pretty difficult. Gay people abuse children. Or gay people are pedophiles. Oh, people love to hate what they don't understand so much that they may fabricate information not only to reinforce their own animosity, but also to convince others to share the same sentiments. It's true that before the 1990s, gay men were vilified as pedophiles. This association with pedophilia is an attempt by a small anti-gay minority to regain influence using another classic strawman argument. The flawed reasoning suggests that since some pedophiles abuse boys, the same gender, then those pedophiles must be gay. And therefore, all gays are pedophiles. For certain individuals and cultures, any sexual behavior deemed deviant leads to the assumption that someone engaging in one specific deviant act is the same as someone engaging in another type of deviant act, or even all deviant acts. Some people just fail to distinguish between them, viewing one as interchangeable and synonymous with the other. This is why some individuals randomly bring up bestiality when discussing same-sex marriage. To them, there might be no literal difference between a man having intercourse with another man and a man having intercourse with a horse or a child. But they forget that only one of these scenarios involves something very essential: consent from a legal adult. Things like pedophilia, zoophilia, or objectophilia fall under paraphilia, when they involve affection for an object that cannot provide consent. By the way, pedophilia is not the same as child criminality. Many people who commit child abuse are not actually pedophiles. Likewise, there are pedophiles who have never harmed a child, either because they have sought professional help or because they can conceal this inclination well. But that's a different topic. In conclusion, there are homosexual pedophiles and there are heterosexual pedophiles. And even if the initial statement were true, it doesn't automatically imply that they engage in child abuse. If gay people have children, they will also be gay. Or children of gay people also become gay. Okay, if all homosexual parents produce gay children, why don't all heterosexual parents produce only straight children? Where do all these gay people come from? As mentioned before, most gay people are actually the product of heterosexual pairings. Of course, there are children of gay parents who are gay themselves, but they certainly don't become gay because their parents are. Your sexual orientation does not depend on your parents' sexual orientation. Here's another anecdote from the web. My lesbian sister has been a lesbian since childhood. There were 3 other children and a mother and father in our family, all straight. How did that happen? And how could she have left us alone? She lived with us. Even so, all the straight sisters remained straight. Perfectly, she's the only one of the 4 of us to have had a kid. Her daughter is the light of all of my family's lives. She's almost 16, and even though her mother is a lesbian, she's straight. And remember, so are her 3 straight aunts. I guess my sister is not very good at grooming. They would, of course, be more likely to pass on their gay genes if they were forced into heterosexual pairings. So what? It's no more consequential than left-handed people passing down their lefty genes. So maybe you should make up your mind. Either homosexuality is unnatural because gay people cannot procreate, or gay people shouldn't have relationships because they could potentially pass on a gay gene. My child cannot be gay. Or, it's impossible for my child to be gay. The "it doesn't affect me" mentality. This comment, again, implies that homosexuality is caused by external factors. However, no matter how heterosexual you are and how heterosexually you raise your child, it won't change their true sexual orientation. Sometimes I wish more people were not straight so they would be more exposed to it. Because it's nothing bad. If you expect your child to be straight to fulfill personal desires, such as having grandchildren, then you're imposing your own expectations on them, even before they are born. Once they are here, why not let them be who they are? Gay people were sexually harassed or raped when they were young. Some probably were, but that isn't what made them gay, because they already had been gay by the time it happened. And there are also straight people who were harassed and raped in the past, but it didn't change their sexual orientation. Gay people have had a bad experience with the opposite gender. Or, gay people hate the opposite gender. If you are straight, how do you perceive your own gender? Do you hate your own gender? No? Okay, and have you had any bad experience with your own gender that made you straight? No? Then why the hell should it be different for gay people? Gay men simply haven't found the right woman yet. Let's assume you're a straight man. How would you feel if I said to you, you know what? You just haven't found the right man yet. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? If gay people see insert name, they will quickly become straight. Many years ago, I happened to watch a performance by the French singer Alizée. Perhaps you remember her. Her image as a Lolita helped establish her as a pop icon. Many straight men were crazy about her, as seen in the comments under her videos. And I recall one comment that stood out. How can there possibly be men who don't weaken at the sight of her? If they saw this video, they would quickly become straight. That was the comment. So, firstly, there are certainly straight men who are not into Alizée, because they have other preferences. Secondly, even if it were true that every straight man was into her, I, for example, am a woman, and I am not gay. So according to this logic, I should also weaken at the sight of her and quickly become gay. Strangely, it didn't work for me. Homosexuality can be cured. There are so-called conversion therapies, pseudo-scientific practices aimed at changing a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to conform to heterosexual or cisgender norms. The outcomes of these therapies are shocking.
It made me not trust. It made me not trust licensed mental health professionals. It made me closed off. I just feel so hurt by people that I thought that I could trust. I did feel suicidal. It's hard to talk about.
I felt shamed by this doctor. When I immediately left this treatment, it's not so much that I wanted to kill myself as I thought I was already dead.
57% of people who participate in this therapy become suicidal. And that is where I ended up. At the end of those 6 months, I was barely functioning, and I was dealing with all of these crazy thoughts in my head that I wasn't getting better because I'm not a good person and God doesn't want me in heaven anyway. And as I went to a real psychiatrist and realized, oh, this is really unhealthy for me, and if I keep going down this path, there's a good chance I'm not going to stay alive.
There was stuff that I wouldn't wish upon anybody else. I mean, I did leave there different. I left there with suicidal thoughts. I left there with higher anxiety. I left there with distrust for the entire world. I did not change. I still had the same emotions. I just hated myself more for them.
Homosexuality is not a disease, but a common form of human coexistence that does not require therapy. In Germany, for example, the law to protect against conversion treatments was enacted in 2020. It prohibits conversion therapies for minors under 18 and includes a ban on advertising them. Non-gay people have no reason to support gay people. Or, non-gay people have no right to support gay people. Okay, so right-handed people have no right to support left-handed people. Is that what you're trying to say? Anyone who supports gay people is gay themselves. Or people who support gay people are just adequate. I support gay people, but I'm not gay myself. So, no. And you won't believe it, there is even the reverse case. Homosexual people who are homophobic. They have basically internalized this homophobia, and it then acts like an enemy from within. This is called internalized homophobia, and it is common in countries that persecute homosexuality. Thank God we are not gay. Or, I just feel sorry for gay people. I can't even imagine how often situations like this occur when you, as a homosexual person, sit at the table with clueless people who initially seem relatively appropriate, but then suddenly spew homophobic nonsense and end by saying, "Thank God we're not like that." Counter question. How do you know? Just because you're talking to someone who seems a decent person doesn't automatically mean they're straight. You just assume so because you have prejudices in your head. I'm not homophobic, but nature created men and women for a reason. I'm not homophobic, but I don't want to get approached by gay people. I'm not homophobic, but I don't want my child to be gay. And so on and so forth. If you were not homophobic, then you would not care whether a gay gene were passed to the next generation, because it's nothing bad. In principle, anyone can express criticism about a person regardless of whether that person is straight or gay. But why use the first part then? Very often, this phrase is only used to conceal the second part of the sentence containing a negative statement because no one wants to be called homophobic, right? After all, this word has a negative connotation. Now, here is the only valid statement someone can say against homosexuality. I am sexually not attracted to my own gender, and therefore I will not engage in sexual activities with it. Period. Everything else falls in the category of homophobic nonsense. You're not gay? Cool. Don't have gay intercourse. And now move on with your life. I'm not homophobic because I'm not afraid of gay people. If you're a man and not afraid of gay people, why don't you want to get hit on by another man, but at the same time are okay with being hit on by a woman? Okay, even if this doesn't apply to you. The term homophobia contains the word phobia, which originally suggests an irrational fear, even though it doesn't necessarily manifest as such in this context. But people tend to ignore the second meaning of this word, which is an irrational aversion. Naturally, many homophobes use the word phobia in the first meaning as an excuse to avoid being labeled homophobic, because, again, it has a negative connotation. But even if there was just one meaning, this term has already become established worldwide, so there's probably no turning back. That's all propaganda. Propaganda in this context is a word that is very common in East European culture, and it's one of the most ridiculous comments. By definition, there cannot be any propaganda for homosexuality in this world because one cannot promote what is biological. Similarly, there cannot be any propaganda for dark skin, green eyes, or red hair. However, there can be propaganda for homophobia. People's mindset won't change as long as there are commercials like this.
Ой, я так рада, у нас сегодня мальчишку усыновили. Петенька, ты рад, что у тебя появятся мама и папа? А вот и папа.
Ну, привет.
Привет.
Пойдем?
Где моя мама?
Так вот она, твоя новая мама. Ну что ты, не расстраивайся. Теперь у тебя будет настоящая, полноценная семья. Спасибо вам большое. Мы поедем.
Такую Россию ты выберешь. Реши будущее страны. Голосуй за поправки в Конституцию.
That's just my opinion. Would you say I have another opinion about your skin color or eye color? Homophobia is not an opinion. It's oppression. Still, I don't like them. Still, you generalize a whole group of people. Of course, we don't like every person we encounter throughout our lives. But a whole group of people who doesn't harm anyone by their sexual orientation? People always find it difficult to accept things that are different or uncommon. And since most of us tend to follow herd mentality, we just follow what the majority of people think when we ourselves don't have a strong opinion about some issue, thinking that if so many people think this way, then it should more or less be correct. You cannot change your upbringing just like that. So if you live in a more homophobic culture, then it might be difficult for it to go away. Please note that this was just a selection and there are certainly many other comments I didn't mention in this video. As I said at the very beginning, it's 2024 and there is a widespread availability of information about this topic. Let's agree that we all have some prejudices or a strange gut feeling towards certain groups of people who are different. I'm not exempt from that. I certainly have some group in mind where I suddenly have some odd thoughts, but I don't go around declaring they all have to go or they all need to be executed. That's nonsense. I recognize that my prejudices are based on ignorance. And just because I'm uninformed and haven't taken the effort to get to know this group of people better, I don't have the right to pass any judgments. Personally, I dislike this negative feeling, so I prefer to make an effort to connect with these groups, which might seem a bit suspicious to me at the moment. But eventually, I might realize, hey, these are perfectly decent people. If you also have prejudices against any group of people who harm no one by just being themselves, and this feeling bothers you, don't choose to stay ignorant and just take the effort to get to know some of them. In 2024, that shouldn't be a problem anymore, because prejudices benefit no one, neither you nor the affected person. Regarding homosexuality, I really hope this video has made you reflect a little bit. Homosexual individuals are everyone. They are among your grandparents, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your children, your doctors, your accountant, your boss, your lawyer, etc. They are everyone. And if you are homosexual yourself, I hope you'll like this video. Please share and spread it throughout the internet.